we're now ready to stitch the waistband to the skirt. Okay, and we're going to stitch right sides to right sides. Okay, so, and keep in mind that we are taking a side that's finished and we're sewing a waistband that's not finished together. So that means that I need to leave 5/8 on the waistband so that when after I sew it on, I can come back and finish that edge. Okay, so I'm going to measure that, all right, and I'm going to pin and I'm going to sew. Now when you put on a waistband on a regular skirt or pants, it's going to have notches, and you're going to you're going to make sure your notches are together. Notches help us to put pieces together, and so you make sure you match up the notches, and then usually there's a dot or something to where the seam is like a side seam or something. So I'm going to go ahead and match this up. Now just so you know, on this one they're actually the exact same size, but on a typical waistband, usually your waistband is a little bit smaller because you ease the skirt into your waist, and so you're taking a skirt where you have the full hip measurement and then it goes up to the waist. So usually, and then the waistband is often a little bit smaller. But on this sample, we didn't really worry so much about that. Okay, so I left 5/8 on this side, and now I'm going to leave 2 1/8 inch on the underlap. Okay, so 2 1/8 is right here. So I think we're actually really good. Yeah, that's perfect. So there's my 2 1/8. Now you might say to yourself, why 2 1/8? Well, I'll tell you. The 2 1/8 is we want to leave an extension so that we can put our, we're going to put a hook and eye and snaps. Sometimes you do a hook and eye and a button, but usually a waistband will have a special waistband snap, hook and eye, and then the snaps just kind of help it to stay together. So the reason I have left 2 1/8 is because I need 5/8 for the seam here at the end, and then I want to have 1.5 inches for the extension for the underlap. So that's why this is 2 1/8. There's a lot of math with sewing, you've probably noticed, and that's good. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and sew this, okay? And remember, this is folded back because there's actually a zipper there in real life. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this here and line up your 5/8. Okay, and I like to start in a little ways again, and then I back up, and then I come forward again. Now some people like to start at the very edge of the seam and then go forward and then back and then forward, but I find that it goes a little bit easier on the machine, or the feed dog has something to pick up if you start in like maybe a 1/4 inch or less. So I like to start in, and then I start right away backing up, and then I go forward. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm just going to sew a regular 5/8 seam. Okay. And when I get to a pin, I take the pins out. Okay. Why don't we sew over pins? Because it breaks needles, and you don't want a piece of pin flying in your eye. So hopefully that scared you enough to not sew over your pins. If you're going to sew over pins, you need to wear safety glasses, which I don't do. But I do wear glasses, so I'm somewhat protected here. But anyway, just don't do that. Just don't sew over pins. That's just a habit you don't want to get into. Okay, so when I came off, see, I'm sewing with the band up. So here's this would be the little garment piece, the skirt. So I get to the end of the skirt, and now I'm going to go back over, and I'm done. Okay, so I have now sewn the waistband to the skirt, so you can see how lovely that looks. And they're 1/8 of an inch apart, so now my stay stitching will not show. Okay, we're doing good. All right, now we're going to press the waistband seam allowance. Oh, yeah, the waistband seam allowance. We're on step 6. So I'm first going to press it was sewn, then I'm going to press it open, and then I'm going to press both sides away from the skirt toward the band. This prevents seam wells. Okay, so let's go over to the iron. Okay, and I'm just going to do it right here by my machine. So the first thing is pressing it as it was sewn, just kind of embeds your stitches. Oh, and look, problem alert. See how this little zipper thing, I'm going to have to undo a few stitches because when I was sewing, it folded over. And you know, I could have sewed from this side and maybe that would have been a little easier. Let me fix that little problem and I'll be right back. Okay, so I fixed our little problem. So if you get a problem, you got to stop and fix it. Okay, so now I've pressed this just as I sewed it. And now it says to press it open. And you're probably thinking, why do I need to press it open? It's just going to end up together towards the band. Okay, I'll tell you why. It's because if you don't press your seam open before you press them together, then when you press them together, you get little wells, seam wells, we call it, which means that it doesn't open up right at the stitching. Okay, so if I just went like this and pressed it, then I might not get a really clean open seam right here. So this is a very important thing to remember. Press your seams open first. I remember I had a friend, I still have her as a friend actually, but we were sewing together one time and I said, oh, make sure you press your seam open first. And she goes, why would I do that? And I explained it. She goes, that's genius. And I'm thinking, how sad that she's sewn all those years. Didn't know that. Okay, I'm using a little tiny ironing board. And you might call it that. It's actually for small seams and for sleeves. And so it's easier to put it on here so that I can press this open. Okay. And make sure your iron is hot enough and that it steams so that will make sure it's actually doing what you want it to do. And our big irons at the back are bigger steam irons. Okay. All right, there. So now we have that. And now we're going to go back and press them both towards the band because that's where the seam goes. The seam is going to lie inside the band. So I had a teacher once in college that had a saying, and her saying was, a band is a band is a band. So once you learn how to do a waistband, you should be able to do all sorts of different bands, whether it's on a sleeve, at the end of a sleeve, on a neck, all sorts of bands. Okay, look at this. Here it is, and we've now pressed it towards the band. Okay,